All right, welcome to our panel on religion and the American experiment. My name is Josh Gillespie, and I'm the digital director for Principles First. Today, we are joined by three distinguished leaders who operate at the unique intersection of faith, civic life, and institutional strategy. Our moderator, Diana Brown, is a sociologist and residential minister at Georgetown University, a strategist for interfaith organizations and host of the Soloist podcast. She specializes in using honest dialogue to navigate modern political and demographic shifts. Mark Tooley is president of the Institute on Religion and Democracy and editor of Providence. A former CIA officer and Georgetown graduate, he is a prolific author on Methodism and foreign policy, exploring the religious roots of American reconciliation and national security. Finally, Reed Howard is a United Methodist minister and chief strategy officer of Future Caucus, the nation's largest bipartisan organization of Gen Z and millennial lawmakers in Congress and state legislatures. A democracy practitioner fellow at UVA's Karsh Institute, Reed lives in an intentional interfaith community at Georgetown and works with the Aspen Institute to bridge divides through moral leadership. Please welcome our next panel.
Thank you all for being with us today. And Reed and Mark, it's really an honor to be with you. And we're talking about the First Amendment and the religious experiment, the American religious experiment. So the First Amendment, as we know, provides a few protections: the freedom of religion, of the press, of speech, of assembly, and the right to petition. But today we're mainly focusing on the freedom of religion, which includes the Establishment Clause, that the United States will not pass any law towards an official religion, and the Exercise Clause, which allows everyone the freedom to freely practice their own religion. So just to start, maybe we can start with Reed, and then we'll go to Mark. What does the First Amendment mean to you?
Well, thanks, Diana. And I just want to say it's really good to be here. I think for some of us, this is our 6th or 7th Principles First Summit, and so it's good to be with old friends. And the freedom of religion is so essential to who we are. And at this moment, we are gathering at the 250th anniversary of our country. And I think it's the time to revisit some of the founding aspirations of our country to measure how much we have lived up to it. And when our founders were thinking about the country they wanted to build, they knew that we would constantly have to wrestle with these larger universal questions. That's what democracy is. It is constantly debating them. And I don't know about all of you, but I feel like we're embattled in these debates right now. They feel fresh, as if our rights were just being written. And the freedom of religion, I think people underestimate how essential that was to the American Revolution. 13 colonies, all practiced different religions. You had Anabaptists and Quakers and Jews and Protestants, and they wanted to establish freedom from the tyranny of the Church of England, who said that in order to hold public office, in order to participate in elements of public life, you had to follow one certain religion. And so this freedom is essential, but it is not necessarily the first freedom. I think it's interesting to point out when Thomas Jefferson and James Madison were debating what to include in the Bill of Rights, there were actually two others. The freedom of religion was the Third Amendment that got edited out in the process. So for everyone who says that we are a Christian nation, that has been contested from the very beginning of our republic.
Well, an honor to be back here with you, and great to see even with the bright lights, I can recognize friends there in the audience. The First Amendment and freedom of religion are essential to America's identity. Without freedom of religion, could any other freedoms be sustained? So all of us, whether religious or not, should be deeply committed to freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. I think it's rooted in a deep spirituality, just as Christians and Jews and others believe that God does not impose himself on us and leaves it up to us to decide how we're going to come down with him. So should society and so should the government respect the rights of the individual to choose where they come down religiously. I also think freedom of religion is based on a very realistic understanding of human nature that is also spiritual, that we are fallen, and even if the government were to have, quote unquote, the right religion and were to impose it, it would be exploited and it would be corrupted, and that so-called right religion would be tainted by that coercion. So freedom of religion is absolutely central to the American project.
Thank you. And I'm very aware here that I'm talking to two people of faith, and your faith for both of you has shaped your public work. And so I'm curious if we can get a little bit personal, actually, and talk about how your personal experience with your own religion, your religious and spiritual beliefs, is shaped by belonging to a public that has the freedom of religion, and where you may not necessarily see at all times, if even sometimes it could even feel rare in many settings for your beliefs to feel publicly endorsed or understood. So I was wondering if you could share a time or a story when you were in a public setting when your religious or spiritual beliefs were challenged, maybe even offended. And how did you navigate that experience? And what did it teach you ultimately about what it means to be an American? Who wants to start?
I'm looking to you, Mark.
Mark, you can start this.
Well, I'll open with my provocative childhood story in that I literally grew up with the Nazi Party, which was headquartered in Arlington, Virginia, right across the river. And their headquarters had the Nazi flag and the pictures of Hitler, and the Nazis marched in our 4th of July parade every year. And they met in public high school space, and people booed or responded with silence. But to my recollection, Arlington County never disputed their legal right to march or to assemble. And in retrospect, as offensive as that was wise in that recalling the Louis Brandeis quote, "Light is the best disinfectant." Had anyone tried to prohibit their meeting, they would have been gifted an allure they otherwise did not have. When they were marching in our 4th of July parade, it was they were pathetic and sorrowful and obviously lost people. They were not making any converts. So to me, as a child and young man, that was a very vivid demonstration of freedom of speech, that even the most wicked kind of speech should be legally permitted so it can be contested and rebutted.
Thank you.
So one of my most formative experiences with this has been shaped with the struggles that my own denomination has with itself. I'm a proud United Methodist, and over the last several decades, we have been grappling with whether or not to ordain LGBT clergy. And it's been a real point of heartbreak within our institution of people who feel really committed to their sincere reading of the Bible that says that should be omitted, and people who know through their own experience, through their own understanding of Scripture, that we should be open and welcoming and a more inclusive church. And at times that has caused sharp divisions. Just recently we had a huge defection from our church where the denomination split. And it's been great to live in a country where you can have those debates freely and openly, and there's not violence that's perpetuated within it. And so I'm grateful for the freedoms that our country has, that we can have these debates in measured ways, that we can pursue justice, biblical justice, in modern times and with modern understandings. I think we've come out of that a stronger church, even with some of our defections and divisions, and that freedom of conscience, that's what this country is all about.
Thank you so much. I have a question now. Let's start. Questions for both of you that I think relate to a common theme, which we want to just dive into the reality that we have longstanding, but recently a new rise of challengers to the First Amendment, and particularly along the religious line. That people who want to say, America was founded in a Christian milieu, and so even if there is no formal establishment of Christianity as the official religion, we need to pay homage to Christian roots as what inspired this, and people who are basically from that kind of standpoint wanting to say, if we care about continuing a culture that we want to have in the United States, where these freedoms are not only legally protected but possible, then we need to allow for a more public and strong-armed Christian culture and legal apparatus. Anyway, Mark, I'm wondering if you could start and just talk about your experience with this question over the course of your career. And has your views on the First Amendment and how and why we should defend it, have they changed throughout your life?
Yes, this is one of the more disturbing developments in American public life, in American religion. I've always been aligned with traditional and conservative Christianity, and there would have been almost no one 30 or 40 years ago in conservative Christianity, with a few oddball exceptions, who would have contested religious freedom. Billy Graham, the foremost evangelical, probably the most influential religious figure in America in the post-war period, always vigorously affirmed religious freedom. The founders of the religious right were almost all Baptist, and religious freedom is intrinsic to Baptist identity. But what has been happening in this new post-liberal period, we have a new generation of thinkers and leaders who, I call them the Theo Bros. They are, if they're Catholic, they're integralists, but those I look at more closely are my fellow Protestants who are Calvinist confessional state advocates, sometimes proudly self-identifying as Christian nationalists, who will tell us that religious freedom is a liberal innovation. It was a failed or a false premise from the very start. They don't like the First Amendment. They want some kind of religious establishment. Their most important literature would be Stephen Wolf's book of several years ago, The Case for Christian Nationalism. They believe that the state should definitely be the arbiter of religion and to suppress false religion, and even, as Wolf admits in his book, have the power theoretically to kill apostates and blasphemers. And there are many, many very smart, educated young men who are hearkening to this message. And it is a concerning development, and it illustrates that issues that we once thought closed are now back on the table. Religious freedom. Another one is these Christian nationalists say that women should not have the right to vote. We had thought that issue was closed, but now it's back to being an active conversation.
I think that's exactly right, and that's what it means when Ronald Reagan said freedom is only one generation away from extinction. It is not passed on in the bloodstream. We have to fight for these ideas again and again. Christian nationalism is a scourge, and it's back. And let's not forget, it's being practiced by the President of the United States. We have to push back against this. Just the other day, Cardinal Dolan of the Catholic Church went on to denounce the fact that ICE is outside of churches picking up parishioners. This is a huge threat against the practice of religious freedom in our country, and it's dismissed by the likes of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump as just a liberal talking point. Cardinal Dolan is not a liberal. I saw somebody on Twitter recently say this is like if George W. Bush showed up at a No Kings rally. So we have to take these threats seriously. They are as present in our world today as ever.
Well, and a quick follow-up on this. Why do you think these post-liberal ideas are suddenly appealing to people, and what do we do about it?
Well, I was invited to speak at an Ivy League school several years ago by an impressive young man and had a great experience there, and he was from a mainstream church. So I was very shocked having kept in contact with him when he texted me in November objecting to my critique of Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, and volunteered that, and he's now a practicing lawyer and doing very well in life, but volunteered that he liked the Christian nationalist message as described by Stephen Wolfe's book in terms of having a Christian confessional state. And he said, no, after all, my own tradition, which was talking about himself, but also true for me, Methodism offers nothing socially or politically in terms of describing the common good. So that is not true. The Methodist tradition has quite a bit to say about the common good, but I do think that many of our great Protestant traditions have left the field open. The church institutionally is no longer as formative as it once was, and it has ceded ground to the online personalities and the provocateurs who offer a much more exhilarating message to especially young men, and they're very hard to compete with. So we who are in the traditional Protestant churches, evangelical churches, and Roman Catholics are going to have to up our game in articulating a vigorous vision of the common good that's never going to equal what Nick Fuentes has to offer, and we don't want to equal that because our message is going to be based on the premise that we're fallen individuals. We're never going to be perfect this side of the eschaton. We're not going to perfect society, but we can be witnesses for the good and for righteousness in society.
That was beautifully said. More bluntly, I think there's just a lot of twerps out there who mistake their insecurity. They masquerade their insecurity as a strength. And they believe that they have to demonize to be strong themselves. And this are some of the oldest debates that we have as a democracy is, do we want an open republic or a closed republic? Do we want to organize around broad principles of freedom and equality and opportunity? Or do we want to order our national and public life around a closed set of values that are narrowly defined? And I think people who are insecure about the openness of our society and maybe how their own understanding of themselves is being challenged today, they're advocating for that closed republic. They think that is how we muscle through and create prosperity. And what I would say is that is contradictory to the foundation of America. We believed that we could bring together diversity, e pluribus unum, and create something strong. That's, I think, what led our country to greatness over the last 250 years, that we constantly battled and contested differing ideas, but that we saw that debate as one of the great strengths of our country, and we could still come together. Our founders chose an open society, the classical liberal order, and I think that led us to great prosperity, and we should not forget that now at America's 250th birthday. I think it's incumbent on all of us in this room to choose it again. That's the work of being a citizen in a great democracy like ours. And that's how we'll lead the next 250 years.
Thank you, Reed. Reed, I wanted to direct another question to you. So Reed and I are both residential ministers at Georgetown University. Neither of us belong to the Catholic Jesuit tradition that the university belongs to, and yet the university has made space for residential ministers like us, and also Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, Protestant of all kinds, and basically very many different religious faiths to be represented, not only as staff but as leaders and of people with a kind of with spiritual authority that the university respects. And so anyway, it's a great honor to work there in a very, very cool environment, kind of like a little microcosm of what it can look like to really celebrate religious pluralism and to see it as an asset rather than a threat to vibrant religious life. But Reed, I'm wondering if you could tackle this question of what non-Christian faiths have to offer Christians in America.
Yeah, it's a beautiful question. I like to say I live with a Buddhist monk, a Muslim imam, a Latter-day Saint, and 400 college freshmen. And that is not the setup to a joke. It's what we get to do every week. And it has strengthened my own faith to be around people of good conscience. And our debates are more lively. And what it has taught me is that I want to live in communities where we have trust. There's this great social psychologist, Charles Feltman, who created this definition of trust that I've come to see in my work at Georgetown, which is this idea that trust is about making something that is important to you vulnerable to the actions of one another. That's what it means to live in a free society like ours. And we debate these questions all the time in an interreligious context. And we break bread together. We have fun together. We play games together. I have beat Diana at a lot of games, I want you all to know. We have to bridge these divides of our differences and find what makes us human. And that doesn't weaken my own religious beliefs. I still believe that we have eternal souls, and I believe that there's real evil in the world in the form of sin. I don't soften those perspectives. But I will say, here's why trust matters in this larger sense. A couple of years ago, one of our students on Georgetown's campus passed away. And he died over winter break. And when he came back, there were all of these nasty rumors circulating about his death. And it was painful. It was so out of line with the character I knew of these students. And it is the trust that the ministers had developed with one another that we had modeled for the students. It's the time we had spent engaging with our students that allowed us to really muscle through this moment of pain, to have real conversations, to reach understanding. We couldn't figure it out, and then 3 weeks later, the New York Times published a story about this student. And what had happened was halfway around the world, somebody in India saw that there was a Google spike in traffic for this student's name. And they published AI-written obituaries about this student with a different cause for his death. And each time something got a click, there would be 10 more stories that popped up about that specific cause. So our community was twisted and confused, and of course there was pain. And there wasn't one kind of religious answer to how to approach this. There wasn't one kind of moral understanding about how we talk to one another and explain his death and explain what this confusion had done to our community. But it was all of us coming together and respecting each other as equals and as individuals and with the dignity of each person, what I might call the imago Dei, the image of God that's in each of us, that allowed us to get through that moment. Now, that is one small example on one small campus. But I think if you extract that to the national level, that is how we should be with one another. That is how you be a good American at this moment, where we are trying to do the hardest thing ever. We are building the most powerful, the largest multiracial, multi-religious democracy in human history. So yes, that is hard. We have moments of real difficulty and challenge and pain, but we will get through it because at the end of the day, all we have is each other. And so I love to learn from people of different faiths. It makes me stronger in my own.
Thank you so much, Reed. I'll just add a couple of notes on that, which will lead into my final question. And then if we have time, I think we will have one or two questions from the audience. Just around creating a culture for like a vibrant religious pluralism. This is what I really love about our work at Georgetown University is America is a very pluralist place. Any university out here, I don't care what the reputation is for how liberal or how conservative it is, every university in our country is a pluralist place, politically, religiously, ethnically, racially. We all carry backgrounds. Some of them are more visible than others that differ from each other. And the question, though, is how publicly and formally we will acknowledge the differences among us and how we model working through those differences. And Georgetown has chosen to prioritize interreligious understanding. And what I see different at Georgetown, having worked and gone to two other universities, is they are very forward about religious diversity, and the students see it modeled for them of like Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Catholic, Orthodox, LDS, people all working together, laughing together. We have our formal events. We also have casual events where students just come and see us all hanging out together. And they do occasionally ask questions like, "How was this a problem for you at first, or whatever?" But mostly, I think it's just setting the tone of how we see each other as human and really support each other in the sacred day-to-day work of accompanying each other through life. And often the big picture questions of who's right and who's wrong are really not even the day-to-day questions about just how do we be together and love to, and love each other. And anyway, I really appreciate Georgetown for creating a culture where that can be modeled. And I think what I've seen with students is rarely do students start out with like real animosity towards other people. I think where animosity is nurtured is in isolation. But when you can just get people together, you realize that a lot of the malice or the animosity or these people only believe this and I don't like that or whatever, it's because we don't know each other. And so I think just owning our pluralism and the different backgrounds we come from has just been a really powerful thing that I've learned from Georgetown. But I wanted to open the question, whether you want to talk on that or anything else, to how do we create an American culture that supports the First Amendment? Obviously, it is legally protected, but what do we do beyond that in our norms of how we interact with each other, of how we relate to our neighbors, people in our various communities, and our workplaces? How do we create a culture that supports the First Amendment? Mark?
Well, firstly, many of my fellow conservative Christians have adopted a perspective of we're at war all the time with our adversaries and we never take our foot off the pedal. And if you do take your foot off the pedal, somehow you're weak or squishy, which is an unsustainable perspective. It's quite exhausting, but I think it's also not an accurate reflection of Christianity itself. And also, it's just bad for society. Society to endure has to have a certain level of social harmony, and we in America have been blessed, by and large, with an exceptional level of social harmony, with diverse people and perspectives living together peacefully, which really is the gift of God, and we should be grateful for it, and we should be good stewards of it. The other insight that I think my conservative Christians and other fellow religious believers need to most importantly recall is that we can hold on to the specific exceptional tenets of our own faith and believe in their unique truth without diminishing others or ignoring that others with very different beliefs are still creatures of God and still merit dignity and respect, and that the witness of our own faith will be more effective if we accord them that witness, that respect and dignity.
Thank you.
I think we have to go out and do this work, each of us, every day and practice it ourselves. I think if there's any call to action I have for you, it's to go and be a good neighbor, to go and be a localist. Mother Teresa once said, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. I think the best thing each of us can do is practice that. And that seems probably too feel good at a time when our nation is under extreme duress and we have a president who's weaponizing the federal government against many people here, many people speaking at this conference. I assume most of us did not vote for the president, although I hope there are some people who voted for the president who are here. We welcome you into this fold. But I do think we need to go and practice this locally, and I actually think there's real strength in that. That is what this country was founded on. If you need help with that, there's this organization at the Aspen Institute called Weave the Social Fabric Project. If you Google that, they have a map of all these local groups that are active in building the bridges and the connective tissue that we need in our country today at the very local level. Actually, I think all those things compound to be really powerful in the aggregate. And I'll close with this. I am a democracy fellow at the University of Virginia's Karsh Institute of Democracy. Many of you might know UVA was founded by Thomas Jefferson. And so I couldn't not bring that up on a panel about freedom of religion. And on the obelisk that marks his grave are 3 items on Thomas Jefferson's grave. The first is that he is the author of the Declaration of Independence, one of the greatest documents of liberty ever written in human history. The third item is that he founded the University of Virginia. And the middle item is that he's the author of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. Nowhere on his tombstone did he put that he was the President of the United States. He talks about something that he did as governor and as a member in the Virginia legislature. He talks about something that he founded in his own hometown, in his own neck of the woods. I think that's a signal to us. Let us not get caught up in the fact that we have to fight national fights all of the time in order to be powerful or to live a meaningful life. I think each of us can do incredible things in our local community. I think that is where our national revival starts, and you have the power to do that today.
Thank you so much. And I believe we have time for maybe one question from the audience. We've got a microphone. All right.
Hi, my name is Alice. I live in Finksburg, Maryland, and I'm a member of the Episcopal Church. And I actually have a question that I think is a little bit more theological, but it touches to things that you guys are talking about. Jonathan Rauch, in his book, he talked about Christianity being one of the pillars of democracy, if I've got that right. And I think that has been undermined. And a problem I have as a Christian is what I would call the twisting in Christian nationalism against what I understand Christianity to be. To me, it's more about the call of Jesus Christ, and it's about humility, and it's that Howard Thurman says, if you want to find Jesus Christ, go hang out with the disinherited and the dispossessed and the poor and the needy and all that. But I do love what you said about, it's your individual life. That's how you answer that call. But my interpretation of the whole Christian nationalism thing is that it's about dominion, not the humility. And for me, it kind of breaks out like the Old Testament and New Testament thing. So I would just like to know, as people of faith, how do you see about that reclaiming, becoming, Christianity can be a pillar of democracy?
Yes, the Rauch book is very important. As Rauch himself admits, he had publicly hoped that Christianity would recede in America several decades ago now. As a non-religious person, he appreciates that Christianity absolutely is needed to provide the moral and spiritual capital for democracy and for according dignity and respect for all people. The challenge posed by the self-identifying Christian nationalists who want some kind of official religion is that, as you say, the religion is no longer a tool or an expression of humility and service. It's a tool for coercion and control and power for the so-called right people who, once they have that power, never let go and in the process, they corrupt their religion and discredit it. So it's completely self-defeating.
I like the way you framed it between dominion and humility. And I'll just say this. I'll just go back to Scripture. In the 6th chapter of the book of Micah, there's a rhetorical question that's asked. It says, "What does the Lord require of us?" And the answer is to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your Lord. I think that's what we're called to do when we contest these questions of Christian nationalism and false strength. We're called to walk humbly, to do justice, and to love mercy and kindness.
And I would add just one more word in this to a trio: dominion versus humility. I think one of the big questions for this movement is formation. How do you do Christian formation? And there is the assumption among some that you need dominion in order to do that well. And I think that's precisely what Jonathan Rauch is critiquing. And he looks at examples, including my church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he's saying, like, they absolutely do not need dominion or, a massive cultural agreement in order to form people in their faith. And so I think looking for examples of that and trying to lead with, like, what does it really mean to be a Christian? It's these values that Reed was laying out, and leading with that rather than a fear that you need control in order to do formation well. Any follow-ups to that?
No, I think that was well said. I just want to end by thanking all of you for being here. I mentioned at the beginning that I've been coming to Principles First since before they had a national conference. There were little regional dinners all around the country. And certain years, we feel like this movement, this coalition of people are really strong. And sometimes we have felt that contract. And I think it is important for us to keep coming together. We are the keepers of a flame, of this sacred tradition of America, this idea of the classical liberal order. And sometimes that flame gutters, sometimes it swells. But I just wanted to thank you for keeping that flame alive. We are building a better country, and it's because of people like you. So it's a real pleasure to be with you.
Yes, it's a great pleasure to be here. My organization was founded 45 years ago to advocate for as a Christian organization to advocate for democracy, human rights, and religious freedom for all people, and we still stick with that mandate. It's become controversial, but our founding statement points out that America, for better or for worse, is the chief champion of democracy in the world, and if we fail in that mission, who will pick up that torch? So it's a tremendous responsibility that all of us have to contribute towards.
Thank you very much.